So, I've been doing a little thinking about this for the last week or so. In a lot of ways, cringing at the fact that I'm going to have to do this video because I know the ire, the sheer response that I'm probably going to get from a certain group of individuals for doing this video, just for the sheer fact that I'm doing this video and I'm criticizing these two celebrities. And again, I really try to stray away from certain topics, especially when it concerns celebrities and stuff like that, but in this case, given the political nature of it, I feel it's necessary. Before I go any further, let me just first say that I am actually a fan of these artists that I'm about ready to talk about and criticize. I've been a fan of them. I've been a fan of one longer than I've been a fan of the other, but I'm a fan of both nonetheless. I'm talking about Demi Lovato and Ariana Grande. Now again, I know that I'm going to draw the ire and the disillusionment, the sheer, I'm going to essentially irritate and rattle some chains here of the Lovatics and the Arianators. But frankly, this needs to be said, and the hypocrisy needs to be pointed out. So, essentially, I've noticed how Demi Lovato and Ariana Grande are two female artists that are endorsing Hillary Clinton for President of the United States. Primarily due to the fact, I think, that she's a woman, and the fact that they somehow think that Hillary Clinton is somehow a feminist, like a fighter for women's rights and feminism and the feminist movement just because she's a woman. And because Ariana Grande and Demi Lovato are self-described feminists, this is something I really need to address. Because the fact that they are voting for this woman simply because they think that somehow she's going to bring, that this woman's somehow going to bring women's rights to the forefront, that she's going to be this champion and campaigner for women's rights and for feminism, is outright just naive, frankly. I would say idiotic, but a more tame phrase would at least be naive. Because just because Hillary Clinton is a woman does not mean that she is a fighter for women's rights. It does not mean that she's a feminist. It does not mean she's some champion of feminist frequency. To just think that is asinine. And again, not that I'm endorsing the man, but I did vote for the man. I'm basically saying, as far as bourgeois democracy, I voted for Bernie Sanders. And I'm not somehow endorsing him or trying to say anything other than the fact that the man, at least when it comes to his track record, is a social democrat. He has always been a self-described socialist, but he's not really a socialist. He's a social democrat, let's be real. The man is still a champion, though, for, equal rights within the confines of bourgeois legalism. The man has been arrested, even, in the confines of bourgeois legalism for what he stood up for. This man has stood for civil rights and civil liberties for racial equality, for gender equality, and let's be honest, gender pay equality for years now, long before gender pay equality or gender equality was even a big, fad that was put out there, a social justice warrior social media fad. He actually has championed for these reforms since the 60s and even beyond. The man himself is a fighter of equality, and is more of a fighter of equality, is more of a fighter for feminist frequency than Hillary Clinton. So, wouldn't it make more sense for Demi Lovato and Ariana Grande to champion a person like Bernie Sanders rather than Hillary Clinton? I mean, again, the man has more of a feminist, standpoint than Hillary Clinton. The man is a social democrat, and essentially social democracy aims at achieving these goals while still keeping, a form of capitalism, but essentially just, more of a wealth distribution and market, and basically a market system. That's essentially what social democracy is. It doesn't get rid of the capitalist system, it just basically says that you need regulations on it, which is frankly true if you're going to keep a system like that. Otherwise, it just, runs amok. Regardless, however, let's just put it back into the confines of what this video is about. It makes more logical sense if you are a feminist or a gender egalitarian to fight and champion for, a person like Bernie Sanders rather than Hillary Clinton. Just because Bernie Sanders is a man does not make him less of a feminist. It does not make him less of a gender egalitarian. And just because Hillary Clinton is a woman does not make her a feminist or a champion for women's rights. It does not. I know that a lot of people will basically try to make the argument, well, yeah, she is because she's a woman. No. Just because you are a woman does not mean that you are a champion for women's rights. Hillary Clinton didn't even fucking give a damn about women's rights, it seems like, up until about, the early 2000s, late 2000s, when it actually became a thing. She's didn't even support marriage equality until, 2011, 2012, 2013? This woman even fought against civil rights. She was a lawyer who fought against civil rights. This is not a woman of equality. This is not a woman to be supporting, especially if you're any form of a so-called feminist or gender egalitarian. Again, this is about as far as I'm going to get. This is probably about as close as I'm going to get to where the MRAs stand. And I am no way endorsing the MRAs or MRA. I'm not. I frankly, find myself kind of in the middle between the two. I consider myself a gender egalitarian, more along the lines of the feminist frequency. So don't get it twisted. But I am definitely saying that, again, just because Bernie Sanders is a man does not make him any less of a feminist. It does not make him any less of a gender egalitarian. Because the very idea that you're not voting for a man who basically could serve your interests a lot better than Hillary Clinton, because you think that somehow by voting for a woman that's suddenly a vote for feminism, no. Frankly, that's actually sexist in its own right. It just makes more sense. It makes more political and logical sense to vote, towards the person that's definitely going to serve your interess. And Bernie Sanders would seem to serve more of that interest, because Hillary Clinton is more of a moderate, if not even a little bit more leaning of a libertarian. She does not champion women's rights. Oh, sure, she may say a few things here and there, but her level of flip-flopping, her level of basically vagueness, and it just does not seem like she is any sort of champion for feminism. And the fact that Ariana Grande and Demi Lovato claim to be feminists and vote for this type of woman does not really seem to serve, their interests very well. It just seems rather hypocritical. And it seems to contradict basically what they actually stand for. And I could also get into the whole thing that, they're also basically they talk about why women should not be sexualized and stuff like that, yet they participate in that same sexualization. I agree that women should wear whatever the fuck they want without ridicule, But frankly, the fact that you basically talk about, the exploitation of women and the sexualization and exploitation of women, and yet you participate in that same industry that basically sexualizes and exploits you for monetary profit. Hashtag capitalism. So basically, everything that you're doing, along with the fact that you're voting for Hillary Clinton, just basically seems like you talk a lot of talk, but you basically are acting against your own interests. This is just something that kind of came to mind for me, and that's why I kind of wanted to address it. It seemed like there was a level of contradiction and hypocrisy there. Because essentially it's like you're fighting against, you're essentially fighting, you're essentially still working for the master you claim to fight, and you can't fight your master and still basically work and still be a slave of said master. You cannot do both. The old expression of having your cake and eating it too. You can't have both. And I understand what that essentially means for people in Demi and Ariana's position. That essentially means deciding on whether to continue in the industry that they're talented at. And let's be honest, they are talented, at least in my opinion. But it's essentially choosing between continuing that or basically taking up the gauntlet of fighting against that exploitation. And perhaps maybe they will eventually. Maybe one day they'll actually see that beacon. But, of course, after they've profited off, all that other shit. But essentially, I just think that it's just really hypocritical of them to basically claim to be fighting against this exploitation, against this particular system, yet they seem to be active participants in that very system they claim to fight. They claim to be feminists, and yet they seem to be voting for a person they think. Now, granted, I can understand maybe that way of thinking. They think that by voting for Hillary Clinton, a woman, that they're going to get women's rights and feminism. But that's just simply not the case. What you're doing is voting against your own interests. And I hate to say it, but anybody that basically that's a Lovatic and Arianator who's been voting for Hillary Clinton because of that as well, you need to understand that that's just not how it is. Bernie Sanders would have represented a far greater interest to women's rights and feminism and just to equal rights in general than Hillary Clinton ever has, would, and will do, assuming she does much of anything at all for feminism or women's rights. So, essentially what I'm just trying to say is, as much as I love Demi, as much as I love Ariana, as much as I love their music and the stuff that they've, participated in, this is one when it comes down to their politics, I think that they are misinformed, and frankly, I think that they need to really research the issues a little more. I really think that they just are voting against their own interests, and the way that they as far as their supposed stances and their voting their voting stuff, I think it's kind of hypocritical, because essentially you're voting against your own interests, and if in a tactical voting situation, Bernie Sanders would be far more of a greater candidate for you. So that's what I wanted to say, and that's about it. I'm NorCal Nick, leader of the revolutionist movement, and this has been NorCal Corner. Peace.